well through members who were actually involved in the incident. Other Nova Scotia police agencies also contacted the RCMP directly for information, and the information was provided to those agencies in those cases as well. With respect to requests for assistance, other Nova Scotia police agencies were asked to assist the RCMP in a variety of ways, and in fact they offered assistance as well. This included agreements by other Nova Scotia police agencies to cover calls for service in RCMP jurisdictions while our officers were occupied in the response, providing investigative assistance as well with priority witness interviews while the situation was unfolding, evacuating potential victims from residents known to the gunman, as well as providing lockdown security to an area hospital where some of the injured victims were being treated.
Merci. Il s'est écoulé quelques minutes entre l'arrivée des toutes premières intervenantes de la GRC. Comme il a dit, la zone de recherche était vaste et constituée des terrains de plusieurs aires boisés pour la plupart, ainsi que de plusieurs résidences et annexes, dont certaines étaient déjà en feu.
And the RCMP is again repeating what we just heard in French right now. So let's go back to Brett, who's watching while the statement is read in French. So Brett, has anything stood out for you so far in terms of new information that we're learning about the events of those days back in April?
Well, I mean, let's go back to those days. I guess the first few hours of this investigation, again, the calls coming in at 10 or 11 o'clock on April 18th, this Saturday night, with RCMP responding to the community of Portapique. It's a very quiet community. It's a dark community, basically, because it's kind of rural. There's no street lights or anything like that. So, and there's not many homes. There's a 100 or so normal residents. The population goes up in the summertime with summer residents there. But that night, it was lit, as we know, by fires in homes, in cars, and we're hearing the response now today, the more detailed response from the RCMP in terms of what they called in terms of backup and officers in that case. And so I was taking a few quick notes here. They said that they, first off initiated a full critical incident package or critical incident team. And so that included people like a crisis negotiator, emergency response team. ERT, emergency response team, is kind of like the SWAT team, but a different name. So they are highly trained officers who are highly trained in using high-powered weapons. And it was officers in the emergency response team, as well as others who eventually were able to encounter the shooter at the end of this shooting at that gas station. We also heard, as part of that full critical incident package, was radio operators, tactical armored vehicles, those large armored vehicles that are often used to transport officers to and from dangerous scenes, as well as dog services and explosives teams. So these are new details that we haven't heard of yet. We haven't heard kind of the full extent of the initial response by RCMP in those early hours in that community of Portapique. The main theme, or one of the secondary themes in that latest update that we got in English, was the communication between the RCMP, the provincial police force, as well as other police forces, police forces in Truro, Nova Scotia, and Halifax, Nova Scotia as well. We heard that the Truro police force was used to lock down one of the hospitals. Speaking of hospitals, we're going to have an ambulance go past me in a moment. Sorry for the audio there. But locked down the hospital that some of the victims were perhaps being taken to. They also evacuated some known residences of the shooter elsewhere. That is likely in the Dartmouth or the Halifax area, with the possible anticipation that this shooter may return to those areas. And so we're hearing from
new information,
right?
Brett, that is new information, isn't it?
That is. So that's new information, certainly. The extent of the communication between the RCMP, who is the lead agency on this, with the other police agencies in the province, that they called upon to assist them as they realized that this situation had expanded beyond the scope and beyond the geographic perimeter that they had set up. I mean, we've heard previously from RCMP that they set up a perimeter. They were going to contain this tragic scene where there's been already, a dozen or so deaths early on, and they thought, we have this. All we have to do now is locate the threat, as they said, the shooter in this case, and then they can kind of deal with things from there. But once that shooter was determined to be outside of that perimeter, then things got much more serious, and they called in the assistance of the other police agencies. Now, they mentioned that there may have been some other media reports saying that there is some criticism that they may not have called in enough assistance quickly enough. And so this is at least partially a response to those criticisms that other media agencies have shared. So the RCMP basically saying, once we knew that this was beyond the scope of everything that we could handle, we certainly did call for assistance from Truro Police as well as Halifax Police. There may be other police agencies that they didn't mention them specifically, but based on the description of the hospital, we know that the hospital was placed on lockdown in Truro, which is kind of halfway between Portapique and Halifax, maybe a little bit closer to Portapique. It is certainly one of the major cities or towns in Nova Scotia, and that is one of the areas that the shooter went through on his kind of continued journey through the province, hitting a series of different crime scenes. You heard the RCMP say that he spent the night in Debert, Nova Scotia, kind of an industrial park, a former military facility. That is where he spent the evening, late Saturday, kind of midnight-ish into 5 a.m., 6 a.m.-ish. Spent it parked in that area. We're not sure exactly what he was doing, but we know that he was there based on security camera footage that the RCMP was able to collect. And so that was referenced again. That's not new information, but it was information that was repeated just now by the RCMP. And then after that, he continued on to those various other communities all across the province as he made his way eventually to Enfield, where this shooting ended. Andrew.
Yeah, and so the RCMP saying, other police agencies were asked and offered to assist. So again, I guess it just seems like the RCMP is trying to say, because people were just wondering, well, what happened in those overnight hours? There were questions about being notified about something that was happening, and we had heard the RCMP saying, it was a fluid situation, but now we are getting a more detailed account of exactly who was involved, and what transpired over those hours.
And really the main takeaway, if we just go back to the latest thing that we've heard, the latest thing that stood out for me at least, is those 650 witnesses, those 650 people that they talked to, that the police have spoken to, not just in Nova Scotia,
Brett,
but all across
once again, I'll
the
just
country.
interrupt you because we're going to hear English again.
And witness accounts that the gunman did not use the RCMP replica vehicle to pull over any of the victims who were in their vehicles at the time. In terms of the interactions between Constable Stevenson and the gunman, much speculation and many assumptions have been made publicly related to the reporting of the contact and the interaction between Constable Heidi Stevenson and the gunman. As I previously pointed out, thorough and complete investigations do take time, and they rightfully include the involvement of several specialized resources in order to piece together the facts. We have not fully completed this component of the overall investigation. However, I can provide you with a few details based on the evidence. While Constable Stevenson and the gunman's vehicles collided, we do not believe that Constable Stevenson rammed the gunman's vehicle. We can also tell you that the gunman's vehicle sustained more damage than Constable Stevenson's police vehicle did, and that she bravely engaged the gunman, and that there was an exchange of gunfire between Constable Stevenson and the gunman. As a final point here, Constable Stevenson and Constable Morrison, who had been shot earlier in the morning, just prior to the contact between the gunman and Constable Stevenson, they were both wearing their soft and their hard body armor. In terms of the acquisition of RCMP equipment or police uniforms, our investigation has uncovered a familial association between the gunman and two retired members of the RCMP. Both of these retired members were estranged from the gunman, and both have fully cooperated with the investigation. It is not believed that either of these retired RCMP members provided operational duty uniforms to the gunman, such as the items that were in his possession and discarded at one of the murder scenes. In addition, the investigation has determined that the gunman had been associated to a police officer from another Nova Scotia police agency. This officer has also been interviewed and has cooperated with the investigation. And we also believe that this officer was not responsible for providing any of the uniform items to the gunman. The investigation into how the gunman acquired the RCMP uniform pieces is still ongoing. In terms of the relationship between the gunman and the RCMP itself, as another point of specific interest, the gunman was never associated to the RCMP as a volunteer or an auxiliary RCMP police officer, nor did the RCMP ever have any special relationship with the gunman of any kind.
Interception d'automobilistes par le tireur. J'aborderai maintenant certaines questions liées au déplacement du tireur le 19 avril. Je suis en mesure de confirmer que, d'après l'enquête et les déclarations des témoins,
And Brett Ruskin once again is joining us as we hear the same statement in French. Interesting details there, Brett, on Constable Heidi Stevenson, who died, but just about what happened with their vehicles and the exchange of gunfire.
Yeah, so let's go, just because it's easier to remember things in this case backwards. So if we go, first of all, to what we most recently heard, and that was details kind of crossing off possible areas, possible ways that this shooter would have gotten his hands on RCMP uniforms. We know that he had a legitimate RCMP uniform. The question was, where did he get it? You can't just buy this off the shelf. Where did he get this? So one of the possible areas that people speculated about was the fact that he was related. He had close connections and close ties to two former RCMP members. So people were thinking, hey, maybe that is where he got this RCMP uniform, these pieces of articles of that RCMP uniform that he wore during this shooting. We just heard from RCMP, no, that is not the case. First of all, those two close, perhaps family members or friends of the shooter have been cooperating with the RCMP in their investigation. They are and were estranged from the shooter in this case. They did not provide him with those articles of clothing that were legitimate pieces of RCMP clothing. We also heard that he had a close connection with a police officer in another Nova Scotia police force, and that officer as well is cooperating with this investigation, and that is not where he got the uniform. So we're kind of crossing off possibilities as to where this gunman received that legitimate, authentic RCMP uniform, but that investigation, as we heard, is still ongoing. That aspect of the investigation is still ongoing as to how he was able to look like an RCMP officer. As for the vehicle that you mentioned at the beginning, Andrew, the vehicles, the interactions with Constable Heidi Stevenson and Constable Morrison as well, who was injured in this shooting, there have been questions about what the interaction was between Constable Heidi Stevenson and the shooter. I was at the scene in Shubenacadie, at kind of an overpass there where I saw where Constable Heidi Stevenson would have interacted with the shooter, where their vehicles hit. I saw the burnt out vehicles, and there was question based on where they were positioned as to whether or not Constable Stevenson tried to ram the vehicle belonging to the shooter. We heard just a moment ago that she did not try to ram this vehicle, and that more damage was done to the shooter's vehicle in this case. Keep in mind, the shooter's vehicle was a former RCMP vehicle that had been scrapped, or not scrapped, but had been put up for auction. All of the major RCMP components had been taken out of it.
All right. And sorry, Brett, once again, we'll listen and we'll chat again.
The gunman had purchased 4 Ford Taurus former police vehicles through local auctions. Emergency equipment installed on these vehicles was purchased by the gunman through a variety of online auctions. The installation of some of this equipment was carried out by the gunman and by some of his associates, including Portapique area neighbors and residents. As previously detailed, the decals installed in the gunman's replica RCMP vehicle were not actual RCMP police vehicle decals. However, they were realistic reproductions, printed by a local printer manufacturer. Management of the local printer manufacturer was not aware that this has taken place and they continue to cooperate with the investigation. In terms of the firearms acquired by the gunman, with respect to the firearms in the gunman's possession, this component of the investigation remains active and involves other domestic and international law enforcement partner agencies. At this time, I can only provide limited details. What can be confirmed is that the gunman had acquired all of these firearms illegally. Of the 5 firearms found in the gunman's possession on April 19th, 3 were obtained illegally from the United States. 1 was obtained illegally in Canada through the estate of an associate who is deceased, or a deceased associate of the gunman. And these are the 4 firearms that we have previously indicated the gunman had on April 18th. The 5th firearm was Constable Stevenson's. In terms of previous interactions with the gunman and any historical complaints, as part of the investigation, we continue to look into the gunman's previous behaviors and his interactions, and they include those with the police. A number of individuals interviewed have indicated that they had observed the gunman in possession of weapons and police uniform items and the fully marked replica RCMP vehicle. None of these witnesses have indicated that they notified the RCMP of their observations. Other witnesses have since come. They did notify the RCMP regarding intimate partner violence claims and firearms complaints against the gunman. This component of the investigation remains active. Information of an officer safety bulletin prepared in 2011 by the Truro Police Service and the Criminal Intelligence Service of Nova Scotia recently became publicly available. In that officer safety bulletin, there was information that the gunman was a denturist who lived and worked in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, that he had a cottage in the Porter Peak area, he was experiencing a mental health crisis, and was in possession of a handgun and rifles, that he disliked the police and that he wanted to kill a police officer. With regard to the firearms referenced within that bulletin, I can confirm that all but one of the firearms found in the gunman's possession on April 19th were acquired after the 2011 bulletin, and thus not those described in the bulletin itself. This bulletin was not available to critical incident commanders or responding police officers as the events were unfolding on April 18th and 19th. The bulletin was brought forward days after the incident and existed in the archives of another Nova Scotia police agency. Generally, officer safety bulletins are purged from the searchable police databases after 2 years. In terms of attempts to understand the motivations of the gunman, in an effort to better understand the gunman, why he committed these horrible crimes, and determine if there were any predictable factors which may assist in preventing future similar tragedies, RCMP profilers and an RCMP forensic psychologist from RCMP National Headquarters Behavioral Analysis Unit have provided valuable assistance to the ongoing investigation. This assistance includes a psychological autopsy of the gunman, and this autopsy is ongoing. The aim of the psychological autopsy is to gain a better understanding of the contributing factors to better comprehend, if possible, the why now, and why in this manner. Behavioral analysts have shared some of their preliminary findings with the investigative team. In those findings, the gunman was described as what is called an injustice collector, one who held on to conflict or differences with others, turning them inward until they boiled over in rage. Some recipients of his wrath of violence were targeted for perceived injustices of the past, others were reactive targets of his rage, and some were just random targets. We may never uncover all of the details or fully understand why the gunman did what he did. The investigation is committed to providing answers to the victims, the surviving family members, to the public that we serve, and to hold anyone who played a role accountable in these horrific crimes. This is our work, and this work continues. Thank you.
Acquisition de véhicules de police et de matériel de secours. Pour ce qui est des anciens véhicules de police dont le tireur a fait de l'acquisition et avait en sa possession, l'enquête a confirmé qu'il s'agissait de 4 Ford Taurus ayant servi d'autopatrouille qui l'intéressait à acheter
And
dans
once
un
again,
encadre.
we are going to go to Brett as we listen to the same statement in French. So, Brett, what did we learn there in terms of the firearms and other details?
Yeah, so there's lots of new details in there, or at least clarifications of different details. So let's, again, just go with one of the phrases that really stood out for me just in listening to that. We know that RCMP profilers, criminal profilers, are trying to piece together, kind of post-mortem, what this shooter may have been thinking, what may have caused him to conduct himself in this way and to do this shooting. And so we heard the term injustice collector. And it was described by RCMP there as someone who collects or takes note of perceived injustices or conflicts that he may have with different individuals, and then it boils over. And so that is the description, that is kind of the psychological autopsy that the RCMP have done on him. We also heard before that the 2011 Officer Safety Bulletin. So you may have heard that and been thinking, wait, they knew about him in 2011. Why wasn't something else done? Why weren't officers kind of fully aware of the situation when they were responding? So 2011, they have this Officer Safety Bulletin. They have his name, his employment, a description of him, as well as the fact that he owned firearms and that he had intentions to kill police. That's 2011. That was an Officer Safety Bulletin that was then purged from RCMP archives and RCMP records after 2 years, as is done typically and kind of as a protocol base from those records. But so the RCMP officers who were responding, who were kind of searching this individual's name as they were responding to this shooting, were not initially aware of this Officer Safety Bulletin that had been prepared in 2011. It came to light by another police force here in the province, because these Officer Safety Bulletins are distributed to all the different police forces in the province, because an officer said, hey, I remember that name. I'm going to look into our archives, which aren't purged like the RCMP archives are, and that is how this bulletin came to light. So RCMP knew in 2011 about the existence and the name and the identity of this shooter, but those records were then purged 2 years later, as is typical protocol. So nothing kind of untoward there. That's just basically there's these records, these bulletins that are created, and at some point those archives need to be deleted to make room for more material. So we also heard about the firearms. We heard that there were 5 firearms that were found in the shooter's vehicle, or at least in his possession at the end of this shooting. We know that there were 5 there. One of them belonged to Constable Heidi Stevenson. He took her pistol, her service pistol, after their interaction.
Good afternoon, everyone, and
her.
welcome to today's update on COVID-19 in New Brunswick. Bonjour tout le monde, et bienvenue à cette mise à jour sur le COVID-19 au Nouveau-Brunswick. Speaking at this afternoon's briefing will be the following individuals: Dr. Jennifer Russell, Chief Medical Officer of Health, and Honorable Blaine Higgs, Premier of New Brunswick. Les personnes suivantes prendront la parole de la séance d'information de cet après-midi. Le Dr. Jennifer Russell, médecin hygiéniste en chef, et l'Honorable Blaine Higgs, Premier ministre de Nouveau-Brunswick. Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Et je voulais juste dire une petite excuse pour le fait qu'on est un peu en retard. Ça arrive des fois qu'on est en retard, peut-être trop souvent. Mais aujourd'hui, lorsque vous avons commencé à tenir ces séances d'information sur la pandémie de COVID-19, je vous avais prévenu que la jour viendra où nous aurions de tristes nouvelles à vous annoncer. Et nous savions que ce n'était qu'une question de temps avant qu'un premier décès attribuable à la COVID-19 ne survienne au Nouveau-Brunswick. Je suis attristée de devoir vous informer que ce jour sombre est arrivé. Hier, une personne âgée entre 80 et 89 ans, ayant des problèmes de santé sous-jacents, est décédée à l'hôpital régional de Hamilton des suites de la COVID-19. Et cette personne est l'un des cas liés à l'éclosion qui sévit présentement dans la zone 5, sur la région de Hamilton-Restigouche, et résidait au manoir de la vallée à Tollville avant son admission à l'hôpital. J'offre mes plus sincères condoléances à la famille et êtres chers de la personne décédée, qui sont en deuil en ces temps difficiles. Et je sais que c'est vraiment un jour très triste et nos pensées sont avec les familles et les proches aujourd'hui de ceux et celles de la personne qui est décédée, et aussi avec toute la population de la région de Hamilton-Restigouche aujourd'hui. When we started holding these briefings on the COVID-19 pandemic, I cautioned that a day would come when we would have sad news to share with you. And we knew it was only a matter of time before New Brunswick would suffer its first loss of life. And I'm saddened to inform you that that unfortunate day has arrived. Yesterday, an individual aged between 80 and 89 with underlying health conditions passed away at the Hamilton Regional Hospital as a result of COVID-19. This individual is one of the cases connected to the ongoing outbreak in Zone 5, which is the Hamilton-Restigouche region, and had been a resident of the Manoir de la Vallée in Atholville prior to being admitted to the hospital. My heartfelt condolences go out to the family and loved ones of this individual as they grieve in this difficult time. And really, my thoughts are with the entire region of Hamilton, Restigouche right now, as they are feeling the stressful effects right now of COVID-19 in a very unfortunate way. So in keeping with our practice of protecting people's privacy, the Department of Health will not be providing any additional details on the particular circumstances surrounding this individual's death. And I want to thank the medical professionals and frontline workers for the care and compassion they have shown for this specific case and all the cases associated with the ongoing outbreak in Zone 5. This is obviously a very stressful time for frontline workers, and so we need to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to support them at this time. So as a province, I think this is a very sad day for all of New Brunswickers. It has been difficult to witness the unfolding outbreak in the Hamilton-Restigouche region, which has gripped that community with stress and worry and now grief. But I think the ripple effects are really being felt around the entire province at this moment in time. I think there is an apprehension that this could happen elsewhere, and it is true, it could happen elsewhere, and so for that very reason, we need to wrap our arms around that community and support them as we would want to be supported if and when a COVID outbreak happens in our community. It has been particularly hard for the staff, the residents, and the families of the Manoir de la Vallée, where half of the cases in the outbreak have occurred. That outbreak continues, and I ask that everyone keep the people of Zone 5 in their thoughts and prayers. Today, there is one new case to report in New Brunswick, and it is in Zone 5. It is an individual aged 20 to 29 who is a healthcare worker employed at the Manoir de la Vallée in Atholville. Aujourd'hui, j'annonce qu'il y a un autre cas de COVID-19 à confirmer dans la province, toujours dans la Zone 5. Il s'agit d'une personne âgée, entre 20 et 29 ans, à l'emploi du Manoir de la Vallée à Atholville, dans le secteur des soins de santé. We continue to work with our partners in Zone 5 to ensure the residents at the Manoir receive the best care possible. So Extramural, Ambulance New Brunswick, Vitalité, Public Health are all working together along with Social Development to make sure that all the needs of the residents are met at this time. So we are grieving today, but we're also moving forward. We can't stand still in our province, and I said the other day, if everybody could just freeze in one place, you know, we could try to stop COVID-19 from continuing to affect us, but we can't do that because of this pandemic that is in our country and around the world. We have to adjust our daily lives and regular routines to meet the challenge of life during this global pandemic. And I think people are tired of hearing the words, this is the new normal. But as we adapt and change and adjust to this reality, I think we have to acknowledge the challenges that we face when doing so, but it is the reality of how we need to be living now. We do have to learn to live with COVID-19, and that is what we are doing. It was never our expectation to have 0 cases or 0 deaths. Early on, we gave projections of worst case scenarios, medium case scenarios, and best case scenarios. But even the best case scenario did not have 0 cases, and the best case scenario did not have 0 deaths. The best case scenario and our objective has always been to minimize the impact of this disease on our province while protecting the healthcare system, while protecting the least vulnerable in our population, those least able to protect themselves. And these would have been pre-existing populations of vulnerable populations even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And those challenges of those vulnerable populations are even highlighted and amplified during a pandemic. The overall health of New Brunswickers requires that we move forward with due care and attention while maintaining our caution against the disease. We have seen unintended consequences. We've seen collateral damage for people's mental health, for people's income, for people who have not been able to access treatment and surgeries in a timely way due to the postponing of these things because of COVID-19. Au cours de la dernière semaine, nous avons été témoins de nombreuses scènes réjouissantes au Nouveau-Brunswick. Des entreprises ont accueilli à nouveau des clients et des familles ont pu se réunir après de nombreuses semaines sans se pouvoir en personne. Mais c'est pas vrai pour tout le monde. Il y en a encore qui peuvent pas voir leurs proches qui sont dans des foyers de soins, etc. Alors, il y a encore du travail à faire et de la patience qu'on doit employer à ce moment. Demain, la majorité du Nouveau-Brunswick fera la transition à la phase jaune du processus de rétablissement, faisant en sorte que certaines des restrictions imposées dans le cadre de l'état d'urgence déclaré par le gouvernement provincial seront davantage assouplies. Le Premier ministre Higgs fournira les renseignements à cet égard dans quelques minutes. Zone 5 will remain in the orange phase until the outbreak in that region is under control. We are not there yet, and I must ask that the residents of Zone 5 continue to be patient and follow public health directions so that we can limit the spread of the disease in that region. And I did mention earlier that it's best to avoid unnecessary travel into and out of that region right now. And we do have more than 300 people who are self-isolating at home and who are patiently or impatiently looking at the calendar every day, checking off the 14 days until their self-isolation is done and they're out of the woods in terms of worrying about developing symptoms for COVID-19 and testing positive. So the people of Campbellton, Restigouche area are bearing the brunt of this current outbreak, and they need the support of all New Brunswickers. I hope that everyone will take the opportunity to reach out to family and friends in that area and show them that New Brunswick stands with them. In the months ahead, there is every chance that other regions of New Brunswick will experience what Campbellton-Restigouche region is going through today. And really at any time, since the fact that our borders are open, COVID-19 can travel in with any one of the people coming across the border every day. And I don't want people to be ostracizing or villainizing or stigmatizing people from that area right now. I know there have been fears about, oh, I saw that person from Campbellton, I know they're from Campbellton and I'm worried. Well, the people that are most concerning for public health right now are at home in their houses, not posing a risk to anyone right now. But we are in a pandemic, so everybody needs to be symptom watching at this moment in time, and that will continue throughout the pandemic, regardless of whether there's an outbreak in this province or not. Outbreaks are part of our reality now, until a vaccine or other treatment for COVID-19 becomes widely available. Other regions may see a swift spreading of cases and the reimposition of restrictions on their lives. We do not wish that to happen, and we're going to do everything we can to avoid that from happening, again, until a vaccine is found. We will respond quickly to limit the spread of this disease whenever and wherever it emerges. And I think we just need the population to be ready to work with us every time we see a situation like this. So when it happens elsewhere in New Brunswick, I know the people of Campbellton and Restigouche will be there for us, just like we have been there for them. We have called on healthcare workers to come from around the province, just like firemen rushing into a fire. There are people going there to help. And they may be scared, but they're very courageous, and I want to acknowledge the work that is being done to make sure that the Campbellton Hospital is being staffed properly and the Manoir de Vallée is being staffed properly. These are very courageous people who are going into a situation that they know has risks, and they are willing to take those risks, and I commend them, and they also need our support. For those living in Zone 5, I must ask you to continue to limit your close contacts in your 2-household bubble. Please avoid close contact with anyone outside your bubble. The restrictions on personal service businesses such as hairstylists, manicurists, and tattoo artists remain in place for the time being. All of New Brunswick shares the grief now felt by the people of the Hamilton-Restigouche region. Toute la population du Nouveau-Brunswick partage le deuil qui vivent présentement les gens de la région de Hamilton-Restigouche. Cette situation doit aussi servir à rappeler aux citoyens du Nouveau-Brunswick que la COVID-19 est présente parmi nous et qu'elle demeurera parmi nous pendant un certain temps encore, durant la pandémie. Cette éclosion nous rappelle la menace concrète que ce virus représente pour notre santé et notre vie. Ne prenez pas de risques avec ce virus. Faites preuve de vigilance. Surveillez l'apparition de symptômes. Et les gens qui veulent faire des rendez-vous avec les autres, prenez-vous les précautions nécessaires. It reminds us of the real threat that this virus poses on our health and our lives. Please don't take chances with the virus. Stay very cautious and watch for symptoms. Again, everybody will need to continuously watch for symptoms for this entire duration of the pandemic. Continue to practice physical distancing whenever you can. When you can't, wear a community face mask that covers your mouth and nose. Remember that we are on a journey together. There are rough seas all around us, and some of us will feel the effects of that more so than others. And I did see this on Facebook the other day, that we may not all be in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. And we can come through this storm together. Thank you very much. Merci.
Good afternoon. Bonjour. Like all New Brunswickers, I received the news of our first death to COVID-19 with a heavy heart. Though we always knew this day would come, we were always hoping for the best that it wouldn't. Sadly today, we also learned of a non-COVID related death of a woman in the Edmundston. On behalf of the people of New Brunswick, my wife Marcia and I extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of both of the individuals, as well as all of those in the region. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. This has been a difficult time for everyone in our province. I want to thank New Brunswickers for their patience and their continued willingness to put the health and safety of everyone in the province first in their efforts to limit the spread of COVID-19. Last week, we made the tough decision to put off the loosening of further restrictions across the province due to an outbreak in Zone 5, the Hamilton region. At that time, Zone 5 also returned to the orange phase to ensure we could get any possible spread of the virus under control. It is important to realize this may not be the only time a zone reverts back a level while we work to determine the extent of an outbreak. Comme nous l'avons vu au cours de la dernière semaine, le virus est encore présent et nous sommes encore vulnérables. Peu importe les mesures de précaution que nous prenons, la meilleure que nous pouvons faire est de réduire les risques pour notre population. In this case, delaying our next step forward by a week gave us the time we needed to determine how widespread the outbreak was and to take the steps needed to protect the health and safety of the people of this province. Thanks to the dedicated efforts of public health and the support of New Brunswickers, especially those who live and work in Zone 5, we were able to do the necessary contact tracing and testing in that region. In fact, we did over 4,000 tests in less than 72 hours. Grâce à la participation de toutes les personnes concernées, nous avons jusqu'à maintenant limité la propagation du virus dans la zone 5. Et grâce à la recherche des contacts, nous avons pu déterminer l'étendue de la propagation. Puisque nous continuons d'avoir de nouveaux cas actifs dans la région de Hamilton, cette région va demeurer dans la phase orange pour l'instant. However, Cabinet and the All-Party Committee on COVID-19 has decided that the rest of the province is ready to move into the next phase of the yellow level. This means that effective tomorrow, outdoor gatherings of 50 people or fewer will be allowed with physical distancing. Indoor religious services of 50 people or fewer will also be permitted, as long as physical distancing is respected. The limit on gatherings will be reviewed on a regular basis and could change depending on risk levels in the province. Regional health authorities will increase the number of elective surgeries they perform, and the number of non-emergency services will also increase. Low-contact sports activities will also be able to operate as per the guidance provided to them by their national or provincial organizations, as long as they identify ways to limit the number and intensity of close contact during play. Toutes les ligues de sport, provinciales, régionales et locales, devront préparer un plan opérationnel. Les ligues de jeunes doivent s'assurer que le nombre de spectateurs qui assistent au match est limité à adultes par enfant. Des efforts raisonnables doivent être faits pour respecter autant que possible les mesures de distanciation physique lors des activités sportives. A number of other services will be allowed to open on June 5th, as long as sanitization requirements are met and physical distancing measures are in place. These include swimming pools, saunas, and water parks, limit of 50 per facility or area, gyms, yoga studios, and dance studios, rinks, and indoor recreational facilities with a limit of 50 per area and for spectators, and pool halls and bowling alleys. When this began, we took the steps necessary to protect our most vulnerable residents, including those living in nursing homes, special care homes, and adult residential facilities. We recognize this has been hard on family and friends who have not been able to visit their loved ones. As part of the further loosening of restrictions in the yellow phase, we will allow outdoor visits of up to 2 visitors at a time. We recognize that not every facility will be able to do this, but we want to be able to give them the option to do so if they can. For the visits to take place, there must be sufficient outdoor space to allow physical distancing of 2 meters or 6 feet from the resident, and this distance must be maintained throughout the visit. If this goes well, on June 19th, controlled indoor visitations in hospitals, nursing homes, special care homes, and adult residential facilities will begin. 1 visitor will be allowed at a time unless the visitor requires support, in which case 2 visitors will be allowed. Le nombre de visiteurs devra être fourni à l'établissement à l'avance. All visitors are required to wear a community face mask during their visit and must adhere to other policies and practices the facility has in place. Facilities will be required to develop a plan to manage visitations prior to the visitation's actual beginning. As well, overnight camps will be allowed to open on Friday, June 19th, as planned. Comme nous l'avons déjà mentionné, les camps de vacances devront mettre en place les mesures de la santé publique, comme la distanciation physique, et nettoyage intensif, et le dépistage des enfants, des parents et du personnel. Les camps de vacances devront aussi préparer un plan opérationnel avant d'ouvrir. Canadian residents that own property in New Brunswick will be allowed into the province as of June 19th if they self-isolate for 14 days upon arrival. As well, Canadian residents that have immediate family in New Brunswick, including a parent, child, sibling, grandchild, grandparent, or significant other, can come to the province as of June 19th if they self-isolate for 14 days upon arrival. Cabinet and the All-Party Committee has also decided that for any resident of Canada, travel into New Brunswick to attend the funeral service or burial of an immediate family member is necessary travel, if conducted in accordance with guidelines of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. The guidelines and more information about this will be available next week. As noted before, this loosening of restrictions does not apply to Zone 5, the Restigouche region, at this time. Tant que nous ne pouvons pas être certains que l'exclusion actuelle a été contenue, la Zone 5 devra demeurer dans la phase orange, qui autorise l'ouverture de plusieurs activités et entreprises. Nous allons continuer à surveiller la situation, mais nous ne devrons pas précipiter les choses. not when the health and safety of all New Brunswickers is at stake. I understand that it is frustrating to those who live and work in the Restigouche region, but taking the proper precautions in the short term will have positive long-term impacts in our province. Working together, we will get through this challenging time. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Merci, Dr. Russell. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue au choix. Chaque journaliste peut poser une question. We will now proceed with questions from the media. Each reporter will have one question, and you have the right to pose your question in the language of your choice. Callum Smith, Global News.
Thanks, Bruce. Dr. Russell, I guess we've heard bits and pieces of this so far, but what else is being done at the manoir to prevent the loss of life for any other New Brunswicker?
So as of right now, all the patients or residents rather, are isolated. Somebody asked me the question the other day if they are able to be isolated individually, and the answer is yes. And the patients who tested positive are all in the same wing. So that's called cohorting. So those people are cohorting in one being cohorted in one area. There is ongoing testing of staff currently, so that anybody who is working with COVID positive patients and otherwise do have the ability to get tested and are tested every couple of days at this moment in time. And in terms of staffing needs, again, the extramural, Ambulance New Brunswick, social development, public health, and Vitalité, and probably Horizon as well, are working to make sure that we have the right amount of workers to assist in the situation at this moment in time, because the people up there who are doing the work currently are working very, very hard, and so we have to make sure that we continue to make sure they have the right support at this time.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Michel Corriveau, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, c'est une question pour Dr. Russell. Dr. Russell, j'aimerais savoir si vous avez ces détails-là. La personne aujourd'hui qui a reçu confirmation, l'employé du manoir de la Vallée, savez-vous si elle était déjà en quarantaine et le premier employé atteint? Est-ce qu'il avait travaillé avec des symptômes avant d'être mis en quarantaine?
Alors, tous les employés de le manoir de la Vallée ont été testés au commencement de l'éclosion. Et ceux et celles qui étaient positifs restent à la maison en quarantaine. Et ceux qui n'avaient pas de symptômes continuent à travailler. Et chaque couple de jours, ils se font tester de nouveau. Alors, c'est la situation maintenant. Et c'est toujours de l'information qu'on suit chaque jour.
Merci, M. Corriveau. Adil Ibrahim.
Thank you. This is a question for Dr. Russell. What is the condition of the rest of the people in hospital now, and how many are they? And how are you are you expecting more deaths within that group?
The last I heard, there are 4 who remain in hospital, and my understanding is that they're stable. And but again, that could change at any time. I think it's very hard to predict, so I don't really like to say that I have a crystal ball to say what's going to happen. So 3 are stable, and there is 1 person in ICU.
Thank you, Ms. Ibrahim. Adam Harris, Telegraph Journal.
Thanks, Bruce. For the Premier, I just want you to elaborate on immediate family members being allowed into the province and if they can self-isolate for 14 days. And then also how you reconcile that on such a hard day for the province with a first death.
Well, I think it's a combination of sadness and hope. We at all points in time through this, both Dr. Russell and myself were always cautiously optimistic, but realistic in the fact that our first death would occur through this virus. So unfortunately, that day did come, not unexpected, but certainly like hoping it wouldn't. But in the same vein, we have to look at those that are being challenged in many other ways, and it's family, it's getting back to a new norm with COVID, and getting on with life in our province and that recovery. We've seen a lot of anxiousness, a lot of emotion, a lot of pent-up emotion that's related to the restrictions that we've had to put on our province. So being cautiously optimistic that we will move forward as a province and recover in a meaningful way. I think that the situation in Hamilton, although extremely unfortunate, has demonstrated a capability that both public health and our health professionals throughout our province has been able to move into an area quickly. When I mentioned 4,000 tests in 72 hours, we hadn't done anything close to that before. But we always said if the need arose, Dr. Russell had said many times that, we want to be able to move in, do rapid testing, and understand and contain the spread. At this point, certainly the understanding is, yes, we do know where it is. It is contained, and we need to move on with the rest of the province. And hopefully, we will be able to move on in this region in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Isabelle Larose.
Oui, bonjour. Ma question s'adresse au Premier ministre. Monsieur Higgs, le ministre de la Sécurité publique du Nouveau-Brunswick, s'est montré favorable hier au passage des touristes québécois qui veulent se rendre aux îles de la Madeleine via traverser, bien sûr, à l'île du Prince-Édouard. Est-ce que vous pouvez confirmer que votre gouvernement veut aller de l'avant avec la mise en place d'un corridor de passage touristique vers les îles de la Madeleine et à quelles conditions?
We said at the beginning we would work with PEI and come up with a kind of a joint proposal. And I know Premier King had been talking with officials in Quebec about the prospects of how this would work. So we'll continue to do that. We haven't restricted people from moving through our province out to other provinces. That's been from the beginning. We just want to be able to understand the traffic, and we want to minimize the risk. But we want to not restrict other provinces from where they are in this pandemic and what they believe is possible for them to achieve. So if Premier King is, and we'll continue to have the same protocols in place, and he's on the same page, then for residents of Quebec to move through our province, through PEI, to their resident on the Magellan Islands, we would certainly find a way to accommodate that.
Thank you, Premier. Merci, Madame Larose. Laura Brown, CTV.
Hi there. I'm wondering, I was speaking to an MLA from the Campbellton area yesterday. He had said that he was told that testing in other nursing homes and long-term care facilities should have already started. I'm wondering, because of the workers and some of them having to work in two different facilities, if testing in other nursing homes and long-term care facilities has begun.
Hi, Laura. So two things. One, originally we were going to test everybody in all the long-term care facilities in that zone. But as we got results back and we looked at all the data, the highest risk obviously is for staff, who work in those particular nursing homes, et cetera, to bring COVID-19 into them. So we're testing the staff of all of those nursing homes at this moment in time in Zone 5. And at this moment in time, staff are not allowed to work in more than one nursing home at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mathieu Wacomo, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Bonjour, ma question est pour le Premier ministre Higgs. Un peu plus tôt, au début de l'éclosion dans la zone 5, je pense que vous aviez dit que l'idée d'avoir une bulle avec l'île du Prince-Édouard était en pause. Je me demandais si maintenant que l'éclosion semble plus ou moins contenu dans la zone 5 si la possibilité d'avoir une bulle touristique avec l'île du Prince-Édouard était à nouveau sur la table avant la fin de l'été.
Yes, I think that certainly is possible, and you know, we will continue to have discussions with my colleagues here in Atlantic Canada, and certainly in this scenario with PEI, we'll work. Certainly, Dr. Russell and her team will work with PEI and looking at this for potentially, you know, early summer is a reality. The next couple weeks will be telling, however, because we are watching closely what unfolds for us here in the province over the next 14 days.
Merci, Monsieur Boiscombe. Thank you, Premier. Kevin Bissett, Canadian Press.
This is also for the Premier. Premier already should expand on that last answer and your discussions with the other premiers in the region as well, and talking to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as far as a regional bubble.
Yeah, well, we have had those discussions, you know, back a few weeks ago, and then of course we've had this little setback or significant setback, but it is localized, so that makes it manageable at this point. But all provinces, you know, I'm talking about our Atlantic provinces, we're in different phases, and we have to recognize that as we move forward. But having those discussions going forward and throughout the summer, so we once again can get back to a reasonable normalcy will be our goal. But I would say the first likelihood of something there would be with PEI.
Thank you, Mr. Bissett. Thank you, Premier. Vicky Hogarth, Charlotte County TV.
Thank you, Bruce. My question is for the Premier. Premier Higgs, I spoke with a federal border agent who said that the Quarantine Act is still in effect at the international border, which means only essential travel is permitted, which also means that Campbell Island residents still can't travel to the mainland to see family or take staycations and vice versa. The yellow phase of recovery doesn't seem to apply to them unless there's a ferry in the water, which has also resulted in businesses staying closed, as well as a 6-year-old girl who left the island with her aunt to visit family on the mainland being ordered to quarantine for 14 days, and she's still separated from her parents who don't know how to get her home. The June 29th date for a seasonal ferry still feels like it's weeks away, and businesses and citizens are suffering. Is there anything that can be done now?
Well, I guess I would like to understand more about those specific cases, because it would be my understanding that we have worked out an arrangement with the state of Maine that people you know, have been able to travel directly through Maine to get to New Brunswick, and haven't been restricted by, you know, the particular quarantine rules that would apply generally. We worked through that process early on, so I would like to maybe know more about these cases and understand what are the nuances here. Is there something that I'm not quite understanding? Because I was quite pleased with the response that I had from the federal government, working with Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and with the state of Maine, in how we could make that work effectively for residents that were stranded on an island.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. Andrew Watt, Telegraph Journal.
Yeah, hi. Not really sure who my question is for, but my question is more of about, you know, now that we're talking about the virus as a reality, it's going to be here for, you know, the foreseeable future. The borders aren't closed. Can somebody just talk to me about what you expect to happen in terms of COVID over the next few months? I mean, you've both spoken about a lot of nervous and apprehension across the province. What is your sense of where things are now and where things are going?
Well, I can start, Andrew, and the Premier can add comments if I miss some points. So from the beginning of the pandemic globally, we had planning sessions. We had a lot of information sharing across jurisdictions from a public health perspective. And then when the government got organized with respect to the pandemic task force as well as the COVID-19 cabinet, we were able to set up a structure whereby we could have the information transmitted amongst all our partners on a regular basis with our emergency operations team, flowing with information in and out of all the different partners in terms of what needed to be operationalized. And so from a health perspective, we have our health response, but an all-of-government approach was also being undertaken concurrently to look at all of the different elements, not just from the health service delivery piece and not just from a public health piece, but making sure that we're aligned with all the different organizations in terms of our approach. And that was really one of the key components of the pandemic task force, to align both RHAs with respect to operationalizing information, EMP, A&B, the nursing homes, special care homes, ARFs, adult residential facilities. And the advantage of the emergency operations team at Health was they had representatives from all different areas of government. So there were working groups every single day meeting around testing, meeting around laboratory medicine, meeting around contact tracing, meeting around whatever issues, vulnerable populations, working out plans for all of those things in a very stepwise approach. So where we are now is we've come through, you know, our first wave with respect to the travel-related cases originally, and then imposing all of the measures. So the Emergency Measures Act, as it was imposed in our red phase, we worked through that. We saw what would happen when we were able to contain the virus at that time, taking into account all of the, as I mentioned before, the unintended consequences, the negative impacts, the collateral damage of all the pieces of society, the economy, and health services that were interrupted at that time. So with all of that knowledge now, moving forward into the next part of our reality, as we've talked about, is that yes, we have a 30, 60, 90-day approach to what's happening right now and in the immediate future, in the near future. And so the next planning phases are really about looking how to transform ourselves while we exist with COVID-19, and that transformation and growth and innovation is happening now in terms of where we need to go next and how best to exist and survive and thrive with COVID-19 in this province and prepare for the second wave. So we are looking at all the different pieces of information that we have learned from through all of the experiences thus far, and we will continue to be learning. This is an evolving situation, and even though we might prepare and try to, we did many tabletop exercises, we've looked at worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, and everything in between. We've done tabletop exercises, we've done mock exercises, we've gone in and done these rapid testing situations, and so there is a vast amount of knowledge now that we've able to consolidate to formulate a way to continue to move forward. So that's where we are, and I think our to be cautiously optimistic as we continue to work together. Again, I've seen enormous amounts of blood, sweat, and tears going into the work to navigate through COVID-19 at this point in time. And I know the citizens of New Brunswick have probably felt it and lived it themselves. And at this point, I will ask Premier Higgs if he has anything to add. But so far, again, I'm proud of all the work that we've done as a province. We have a lot more ahead of us, but I think with what we've been living through and experiencing thus far and the learnings that we're taking away, we do have some opportunities to continue to move forward. Premier Higgs.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. I think what I would just add to that is related to the economic recovery. And we've seen over the last 2 to 3 weeks, according to CFIB, basically the Foundation for Independent Business, we've seen an increase in businesses that are open to go from like 25% to about 58%. In the last week alone, it's climbed from like 54 to 58. And it's climbing. We're seeing businesses basically say, you know, just let us understand the rules and let's get up and get going. I've been very focused with my colleagues across the country and with the discussions we've had about what does New Brunswick look like on a new economy around living with COVID-19 and beyond. So many of the lessons that we've learned through this pandemic in the last 3 months are being put forward as ideas to help us be a new model for government going forward. The activities that we're trying to promote here would see a long-term sustainable view on New Brunswick growing in a way like it never has before. I think we've demonstrated some firsts in the province that are being recognized across the country, and I think we're moving in a way that's generating some hope despite the setback news today. So I'm telling businesses, you know, to find a way to work with this new reality, to look at what's going to be like a year from now or 5 years from now. And my focus is very much not just, you know, it's managing today, but it's building for tomorrow. And in New Brunswick, you know, unfortunately, our province is pretty well taxed out in relation to the level of taxes on personnel and businesses here. So the focus is how do we just get better? And how do we have a future that when we make a decision, it's not just about today, it's about tomorrow, and it's about next year, and it's about the generations to come.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Mr. Waugh. Jean-François Boisvert, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Oui, bonjour. Cette question s'adresse à qui veut bien la répondre, à M. Higgs ou Mme Russell. En dépit de premier cas, ce premier décès qui survient aujourd'hui dans la province, est-ce qu'on peut quand même se compter soulagé de voir que le nombre de cas n'a pas augmenté de façon drastique dans le Restigouche et que l'éclosion semble quand même assez contenue à un seul endroit? En ce sens, est-ce que ça va assez bien pour anticiper un retour à un déconfinement rapide ou est-ce qu'au contraire, on semble faire du surplace et on revient constamment à la case départ?
Alors, à ce moment-ci, le plan, c'est d'attendre au moins 14 jours avant qu'on peut vraiment avoir le plus d'informations possible pour faire nos décisions, pour avancer, soit avancer à la phase jaune ou quoi que ce soit. Parce que c'est 14 jours après l'éclosion a commencé pour voir définitivement si tous les cas qui sont isolés, si on va développer des symptômes et devenir positifs pour le COVID-19. Alors, on va attendre au moins 14 jours pour déterminer combien de nouveaux cas qu'on a, puis s'ils sont tous encore isolés comme ça. Il y a des gens qui diraient qu'il faut attendre un peu plus que ça, plus longtemps que ça, mais on va, au fur et à mesure qu'on a de l'information pour faire des décisions, c'est au moins deux semaines pour faire des décisions comme ça. Et définitivement, même si cette éclosion est contenue, ça ne veut pas dire qu'on n'aura pas d'autres éclosions à d'autres endroits. Comme le Premier ministre a dit, on a encore des gens qui voyagent chaque jour à travers nos frontières. Alors, ça va vraiment pas finir définitivement avant qu'on aura un vaccin.
Merci, M. Boisvert. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Savannah Odd, Telegraph Journal.
Hi there. Given the public health guidance to those in the Campbellton region on not traveling out of the zone for the time being, and that the legislature is set to resume on Tuesday, will the Liberal MLAs of Zone 5 be permitted to attend that sitting? And if so, will any added precautions be taken?
Hi, Savannah. So when public health recommended that people not travel in or out of the area, we really meant unnecessary travel. So necessary travel would include work. So I would be entirely comfortable with people traveling in and out for necessary reasons for work. And so the MLAs would be traveling for work purposes. And everybody in that area and everybody around the province is symptom watching all the time. That is our advice, no matter where you are in the province. In particular, though, that region, we are telling everybody to symptom watch. But again, as I keep saying, our borders are not completely closed. We have border measures in place, but there are still risks with people coming across the border. So everybody in the province needs to continue to monitor for symptoms throughout this entire pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Odd. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Margot Castadet-Acobari, Radio-Canada.
Cette question est pour Dr. Russell, s'il vous plaît. J'aimerais vous revenir en français sur la permission des visites dans les foyers de soins. Est-ce que donc ça sera permis dès demain à l'extérieur, j'ai bien compris, et quelles mesures vraiment vont être mises en place pour assurer la sécurité des résidents dans ces foyers de soins?
Alors la question, c'est les visiteurs au foyer de soins, les visites dehors qu'on va permettre?
Oui.
Alors l'annonce, c'est sur les visitations pour les foyers de soins. Ça va être dehors et ça va être avec, je crois, 2 personnes et il faut que ça soit avec la distanciation physique. C'est ça, vous voulez savoir?
Oui, c'est ça, c'est juste. Et de savoir même quand ça sera permis à l'intérieur, qu'est-ce qui sera mis en place pour assurer la protection des résidents.
Alors, pour une décision avec ça et une annonce avec ça, on voulait vraiment commencer avec les visitations dehors pour voir comment ça déroule avant qu'on avance à des visitations à l'intérieur. Mais les discussions avec le développement social pour les mesures qui seront mises en place pour pour assurer la sécurité de les gens qui vont et viennent. Ça, c'est des protocoles qui vont être mis en place.
Merci, Margot. Thank you, Doctor. Bobby Jean McKinnon, CBC.
Thank you, Bruce. Dr. Russell, how many of the 300 people isolating are healthcare workers, and what does the contact tracing so far indicate for the risk of transmission both in and out of Zone 5?
Hi, Bobby Jean. I just heard part of your question. I think you wanted to know how many of the 300 were self-isolating were healthcare workers? That was part of your question?
That's right. And what does the contact tracing so far indicate in terms of the risk of transmission both in and out of Zone 5?
Regardless of where people are self-isolating, the risk of transmission obviously is low because they're in their household self-isolating. I can't remember the exact number of healthcare workers that were self-isolating. I think in the original few days, I think there were probably at least maybe 13, but I don't have the exact number, but I can get it for you. And so that was the number of healthcare workers that were self-isolating. And in terms of most of the 300 are self-isolating in Zone 5, there were a few in Quebec, and there were a few outside of Zone 5, but I think there was only a handful outside of Zone 5, and like perhaps 5 in total that are outside of Zone 5.
Thank you, Ms. McKinnon. Thank you, Doctor. Geneviève Normand, Radio-Canada.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. It is for Premier Higgs. I'd like to get back to Vicky's question regarding Campobello Island, because Premier, you said that you've had discussions with the federal government, with the state of Maine to keep the border open for the residents, but the reality is that the six-year-old child is stuck on the mainland, and her parents are being told that they can't go pick her up. And residents have said that interpretation of the policy at the border widely depends from an officer to an officer. They say that they can't get a straight answer from authorities. So what insurance can you provide to the 900 New Brunswickers who live on the island about their ability to travel back and forth on the mainland?
Well, in this particular case, I would say send that information to me and you'll get a straight answer because I'll find out what the situation is and we'll deal with it. So that's all I need from this, and maybe our communications can connect with you after this session. But
if I may, Premier, jump in. I think that your chief of staff and I think yourself too has received an email about that on Tuesday.
Well, if so, I haven't seen it. So if we have it, then I'll look for it when I go back, and we will deal with it promptly. So that situation will be understood and dealt with. My answer remains the same as far as our agreement to move back and forth between the island. So I'm surprised to hear of a situation that doesn't allow that for people to come straight through Maine into New Brunswick and vice versa, because that's the kind of the arrangement we have. So I'm interested to learn of exceptions, and I will deal with this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Merci, Madame Normand. Bobby Jean, the number 6. Do you want to go back or leave it? 6 healthcare workers.
Is Bobby Jean still on the line? Because if she is, the number of healthcare workers that are self-isolating currently are 6.
Thank you, Doctor. Cela conclut la séance d'aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup. That concludes today's update. Thank you very much.